Hey, Jackie! Whoa!
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we are live on Facebook, and this is the first in a series of events where, guess what? You're a mom, and I'm about to be a mom. There's that jump. And I have a lot of learning to do. And I know that a lot of it is going to happen on the job, but I thought it might be fun to start my own mom salon, like a gathering of moms that I can learn from as part of my startup, YaYa, which is a community for and by women, where women can build their personal and professional network. So I just thought it'd be so fun to interview you live because it's my research. I only have 9 weeks until this baby comes. Actually, the baby will decide when they come. And this is such a great opportunity for us to be able to talk about motherhood. So, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
First question is, what was your birth experience like with me? You know, from pregnancy to the first 2 days after birth, just anything about the story of my birth. I'm just so curious to learn.
Sure. Well, as you well know, you were the third of my three children. I lost my first, and then your brothers came along. And I had always wanted to have four children. But after the two boys got here, I thought, I'd like more children, but I'm too busy. My jobs are too demanding and it would be too difficult. So we're not going to go for that third child. But we had a summer date and we went to a movie and came home and we're together and boom,
Okay.
that's conception. So when I learned I was pregnant, initially I was rather despondent. One, I hadn't planned on it. Two, I always felt really sick at the beginning of every pregnancy.
Mm.
Three, I was exhausted. And four, it was just unlucky timing in that I had just changed jobs. So I'd taken on a new, even more demanding job. But it took all of about 5 minutes to get over all that and say, yay, new life is on the way. And because you were the third, and because the first one was by emergency C-section. And back in those days, the advice was that if you've had one C-section, everybody else has to be a C-section too. And, that has downsides. I never got to have a fully natural birth. Upside, you can plan on a schedule. So I prearranged for your grandmother, for whom you're named, along with my dad, Jack. And she was going to come up and help out with the boys. And we scheduled up our C-section, and Tom and I went in the morning, and you were born. And oh, you were so lovely. You had hair. My first baby to have hair, and it was red hair. And you were a wonderfully easy child. I think obviously mothers are more relaxed the third time around than they might have been the first. And your brothers were crazy about you, and Jackie Harper was around for a week to help. The boys were staying with their caretaker, who later was your caretaker, Lou Longear, down the street. So I got to have lots of time with you. Except that I was in this new, extremely demanding job. So when I first returned to work, I took you for a couple days. And
Wow.
that was fun, and everybody loved seeing you. But, babies are needy and demanding, and so was my job. So you ended up in Lou Longear's care during the day. And then I was always the first person to leave my agency, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, and I left at 6 p.m. And everybody razzed me on my way out the door saying, it's mid-afternoon. You're coming back, right? And I just said, bye, and left anyway and came running home to my baby and my little boys. So you were a wonderful child, so cooperative, and I was blessed in that all three of my kids were very healthy. So I didn't have any unusual problems. just the usual, adjusting to feeding, thinking they're never going to sleep through the night. And just when you think you can't do it anymore, that's when each of you started sleeping through the night so I could survive the process. And it was a glorious adventure, but only the beginning.
Mom, you shared so much that I want to follow up with. One is just being a woman in the 1980s, starting a new high stakes job. And you've already mentioned some of the bias you face just in trying to leave at 6 p.m. I know some of the awesome men you worked with. One of them is my godfather, but I'm sure not everybody was so supportive. I'm just curious. I would hope that 2021 is very different from when you were pregnant with me, 1985, when I was born, 1986. But I'm just curious, how hard was it to be a working mom in the 1980s?
Well, your godfather was wonderfully supportive. I mean, he made it possible for me to have a job that was very important to me, that satisfied me, and in which I feel I was able to contribute a lot, but never get on an airplane. So I told him, no, you can put me on airplanes, but when you do, I'll be looking for another job because I just can't do that, with my 3 kids. I'm not going to be an absent mother. He never, he always protected me. He was terrific. But, it was still very much a man's world. It was not nearly as diverse a workplace as it is now. Fewer people of color, most places, and a really ingrained attitude, especially in the executive office of the president, of which my agency was a part, that, come on, this is a job that starts at 7 a.m. and it doesn't end until 9 p.m. if it ends then. I mean, the big problems don't even come to roost in the White House until 7 at night. And that's when the real action is. So the expectation was that your days, that you needed to be there all the time. And it was almost as if it were a contest to see who was to turn the lights on and the last to turn them out. And that has nothing to do with productivity, efficiency, quality in your contribution. And so basically I just, smiled, shook my shoulders and razzed back to some of them. They said, I was here at 6 a.m. I said, I know you were. And you went to the White House gym to work out. And then you went to the White House mess to eat breakfast. Then you read 3 newspapers. While I was getting 3 children ready to go out in the world, doing 2 loads of laundry, and got myself down here. And oh, by the way, I left my memo last night after my children went to bed on Clayton's desk, the trade representative. So that was the first thing he saw when he got it in the morning. So don't talk to me about coming in early. And, fortunately, I always tried to be likable and to be kind. And, if you're kind to people, it's hard for them not to be kind back to you. So I made it work, but I was odd in that regard. I was not the normal. And I never could have done it without your godfather's support.
Who was your partner at the time at work?
But he outranked me. So he wasn't my partner at work yet. We were partners later in law practice. But he started out as the general counsel, and I was a deputy general counsel. There was another. And then he got kicked upstairs to be deputy USTR and ambassador Homer, which was terrific, and he earned it. And then I, after a fight with the White House Personnel Office, was finally named general counsel. And then that administration was over, and your godfather and I went into law practice because we decided that if we wanted to be able to send our kids to college, at some point we needed to earn some money, and government service way back then did not pay very well. And of course, law practice did. So we practiced law together.
You said something that is so you, which is if you're a nice person, people will be nice back. And I love the sentiment. I also think people take advantage of nice people. I also think often women and people of color have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And you mentioned a fight you had to pick with some personnel office. I am just curious, like, did you ever feel taken advantage of based on your gender, your motherhood status? Did you feel like you had to work harder for the same maybe acknowledgement or acclaim as some of your male colleagues?
I think I worked harder than some of my male colleagues, and I think other male colleagues worked every bit as hard as I did.
Yeah.
Trade representative worked every bit as hard as I did, and he traveled the world endlessly to boot. I was protected by your godfather from travel, and that is unheard of in our agency. In fact, while I was served there, I never left the country until my last months in office, when I was willing to go make a speech in Canada, which is, like less than a 2-day trip. That's the only time I ever left the country. Nobody else has ever worked at USTR in an executive capacity and never traveled. I mean, it's part of the job.
Trade representative and all, foreign trade.
So I feel that in some ways I benefited from Alan's support, your godfather's support, surely. But I also felt that sometimes I was able to use my gender to my advantage. For example, I chaired some delegations with the Japanese, and they came, and they were an all-male delegation. And at that time, there were many fewer women in serving in the Japanese government than there are now. And there's a great deal of protocol with the Japanese. And so the head of delegation sort of reigns supreme, and everyone else is sort of a minion. I mean, not that that he was ever rude to his colleagues, but there was a distinct hierarchy. And I just wasn't going to buy into that. So when the tea was brought in, I got up to serve it to everyone. And this was like, what do we do now? And that happened to be when I was pregnant with you. So the head of the other delegation felt that he needed to get up too. So there were some interesting turns and twists as a result of cultural differences and my gender difference. But there were other women at USTR. It's not like I was there alone. There were some very fine people of both sexes. There were a few people of color, although I'm kind of hard pressed to remember many, but it was just a different time before we had this richer diversification that we've achieved to some extent, and we'd like to achieve more today.
Even with things like pumping in the 80s, like, were there many bosses above you who were also working moms who knew to advocate for you having breaks to pump or space in the office? What was that like?
I just did what I needed to do. And
where?
I didn't ask anybody's permission. I was fortunate that I had my own office and I could just shut the door. When I was at the State Department, there was an infirmary, and I could go there to have sort of a more sacrosanct, quiet place to pump. And when I was at the Commerce Department, I don't remember where I pumped, but each of you children was born when I was in a different job. So I migrated from job to job. All of my colleagues were supportive. It was pretty weird for your godfather, I think. I mean, he inherited me. My boss left, and then your godfather took his job, and he didn't know who I was. And he said, I wonder what this Judy Bello does around here. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. He called and said, could we meet? And I said, well, sure. I mean, I'm still nursing, so no. Actually, that was Pierce. He called from Commerce, and I brought baby Pierce in and was nursing with him there. And I think he thought that was kind of strange, but he was very accommodating and supportive. And then when I left, I think he still wondered, I wonder what she does here. And then After a while, he said, I can't believe I didn't know what you do here because you do everything.
But wait, literally you're meeting a new boss and you're nursing, like baby on breast covered, I assume, the 80s.
Right? Pierce was hungry. What do you do? Not nurse him? So, so you do what you have to do. And you just expect people to understand enough. They might not approve, but, to understand. And the world has gotten much better in that regard. I mean, at the time when I first nursed a child in front of one of my aunts, and I was nursing, and she had not breastfed her children, and she thought it was rude, frankly, for me to do that in public, meaning amongst family. So attitudes have improved. Attitudes continue to improve, I hope. But you just have to be focused on what is important to you and to make sure, above all, that your child's needs are met. Young children can't fend for themselves. They need adults to be their advocates and to nurture them.
Oh, my friend Gabe Hakeem, who works in early childhood education, would be so happy to hear you say that. One thing we're hearing with YaYa is how burnout women are. And we're in the midst of a burnout epidemic. Women have so many roles to play, and they feel like they're failing in all of them. When you get a lot of pride from being both a mom and an ambitious career woman, how did you compartmentalize your life to feel successful in both? As opposed to feel like you're failing in both?
Well, it's always hard to, I don't call it balance anymore, but it's always hard to integrate your life in as many ways as you would like. And for me, the child rearing years were ones where I had to focus primarily on two audiences that were most important to me. One was my children who couldn't take care of themselves, whom I dearly loved. I brought you into the world. I wanted, if I could have, I would have worked part-time. But your dad was wonderful, but really otherwise engaged and for long periods unpaid and then low paid. So basically, since I was supporting the family, I had to work. And the way I looked at it was that my working time was my me time. So I actually did run at lunch often at the office. And I was very blessed in that I loved my jobs. And if I stopped loving them, well, I changed my job. So I derived immense satisfaction from work. And so that really was enough for me. And then all the rest of my time, what I was really good at back then was totally compartmentalizing. While I was at home with you in the mornings, I wasn't thinking one iota about work. I was with you. Mindfully wasn't a word used then as it is now, but I was totally about my children. And then when I left, I started thinking about work. I walked to the subway, took the subway, made any plans that I needed to make to be up and ready to jump in as soon as I got there, and just jumped right in. And then I compartmentalized you children out of the picture because you were in great hands with Lou Longyear. And I busily worked until 6. And then I said, gotta go. And as soon as I left the building, I didn't think again about work until the 3 of you were softly snoring or snuggling or sleeping in bed. And then I got out my 800-pound early laptop. Oh, were awful. And, worked at home. And then because we didn't really have the internet yet back then. I mean, this was a long time ago. I mean, you were born in 86. It was really early days electronically. And maybe we had some internet, but, there was not a capability for me to email the trade representative a memo. I'd finish a memo at maybe 11 at night, and I wanted to get it to him. And he's a really busy guy. So if you want to get his attention, it needs to be right there first thing in the morning. He used to be a farmer, And so he gets in, he does farmer's hours, although he never goes home. And he comes in really early. So what I would do is I would say, Tom, I'm taking off. I'll be right back. I'd call the guard at the security desk and tell him, I'm on my way in. Please, please be near the front door and let me in urgently. Because around that time, somebody was kidnapped right around USTR. So while it's part of the executive office of the president and it's right across from the old executive office building, it's still kind of a dicey area. So I'd call him and he'd say, yes, ma'am, I'll be right there. It's an easy drive at 11 at night down Route 50. There's no competition. So I could pull right up to the front door, run up, bang on the door once. He'd open the door. I'd give him the memo and say, make sure you leave it right on Clayton's desk so he'll see it first thing. He said, yes, ma'am. Then I jump in my car and go home and go to bed.
That's amazing. Mom, one question I have, one of my biggest fears actually is about maintaining a sense of self in becoming a motherhood. I'm a mother. I don't want to be just Blueberry's mom or Neil's wife and so it sounds like for you, your career was your sense of self. Were there other things that helped you maintain a sense of like, I am Judy, period. I'm not just defined by these other roles.
Well, I chose to define myself. And for many years, I defined myself as Judy the mother, Evermom, and Judy the worker. And because I loved this would not have been possible if I'd had dreary, weary jobs, that depressed me or were boring or didn't make me feel fulfilled. But I was really lucky. I had a string of really good jobs. And therefore, I was able to get what I needed of my sense of self, of my contributions. I was able to do lots of things in my career, and I always exercise because you need to do that for health. But other than that, most of my friends were leading the same kind of life, not all doing the same things, but they were also focusing on children and a job. And we just didn't see each other very often. And that was the norm. I mean, everybody understood that everybody else with young children was basically, the women were focusing on two things. And there just wasn't time to have girls' nights out or, to go bowling with a bunch of girls or guys. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of room. And very well, your dad was so committed to the church and serving the people of the church in numerous ways. He was in a different lane, but he had the same dedication to his work. So I never felt like I was letting my spouse down. I'm sure he never felt he was letting me down. And I wished he'd been more involved in our family more, but he made his choice, I made mine. And in some ways, because he was so preoccupied with the church, I got to be all the more of a parent. And that was a blessing for me. I felt it was a loss for him. But he did a much better job integrating with you guys when you were older. So it worked out for me, but that's not a blueprint for anybody else. You have a million friends, but you're able to integrate your friends a lot into your YaYas. Whatever else it is that you're doing. You've got commitments. You have a much more active friend group at your age than I did. I had the same friend group, but basically all of us knew that we were too busy for each other right then. We'd catch up down the road. And of course we are. My college friends, my law school friends, I see lots of them now. I mean, I've got lots of time now that nobody pays me to work anymore. I still do a lot of work, but I don't get paid for it. And that's the same way with most of my friends who are retired. Some of them, though, are still working and working really hard.
We have a great comment here from one of my favorite mothers in the world, a childhood friend, Corey, who says communicating expectations with your spouse is so important. It's when it goes unsaid that resentment builds. I've confessed to Corey, like, how motherhood changes my marriage is something that's very top of mind for me. In fact, she gave me the most thoughtful off-registry gift in the whole world, which is marriage counseling to prepare
That's great.
for the baby. And so I'm curious, how did motherhood affect, change, challenge your marriage? And how did you work on communication through it? Thank you, Corey, so much.
Corey, I love Corey too. Corey's right. If I were doing anything all over again, I think I would have invested more effort in the coupleness. But for me, remember, your dad was so engaged in the church, that wasn't really an available option. Remember, he worked all day with the church and then he taught in the evening. So that he wasn't there to engage with. I think our marriage would indeed have been stronger. And I do urge you and Neil to have a very close approach and to communicating fully, as Corey is suggesting, about how you feel you may be changing and to what extent, if any, your priorities are a little bit different this 6 months than they were 6 months ago. I think that's vitally important. I can't say that that happened in my marriage, and I think the marriage may have suffered for that, but I didn't really have the opportunity with your dad.
Well, there's a great word that Corey used that is resentment. It feels like you had a tough situation, and my dad was super busy, but you didn't seem to resent, or did you? You know, how do you release resentment? Because I do have also a husband who's in residency, and then he'll be in fellowship. The medical career is very demanding. The hospital always calls. What can I do to prepare my emotions to not build up resentment?
That's a good question. I adapted when, of course, sometimes I did feel some resentment, less actually because your dad didn't participate in any domestic activities. I mowed the lawn, I did the taxes, I washed the cars. He just wouldn't do any of that. And what I faced at various times was, well, should I break up my marriage because he's not meeting my needs? Or do I still love him so much that I will put up with conduct that I don't think is really fair? And each time I asked myself that, I decided breaking up the family was radical. And I was really pretty good at going for a run and just releasing all that, any negativity I had, and coming back and thinking, well, I've got a great gig here. I wish I had a wife sometimes, but to help get all the work done. So I can't, from my experience, answer you well. I think I was very self-sacrificing and occasionally resentful, but you know, it didn't work for me to express it to your dad because he didn't want to hear it and he mocked me.
Oh,
that only made me madder. So I just did this reasoning process with myself. You know, some of my friends said, it's not really a very fair relationship. And, you know, one of my friends divorced. Well, that just wasn't for me. So I learned how to manage it. And, you know, we still had a wonderful life together. And, you know, I loved him all my life. Every time I met him, I just really love that guy. And nearer the end of life, he turned to me more. You know, we became very, very close. And you were there as your dad lay dying. You saw how much he valued me and how appreciative he was and how close we were. So, you know, with respect to Neil or Corey's husband, you guys just have to figure out what your expectations are. And if you feel they're not being fulfilled, talking about it is better than harboring it in your stomach or your heart or your mind and then growing resentful or hard-hearted. That's the worst solution. I mean, nobody wants to be hard-hearted. That helps nobody. So talking in whatever way is most conducive in Corey's relationship, in your relationship, you just have to figure out what that is. And it won't always be the same. I mean, life, we change so much in our lives. So you need to sort of constantly reassess as an individual, but also as a couple. Okay, here's our goals. How well are we meeting them? How fairly are we sharing the things that need to be done? Anybody unhappy here? Do we need to make some course corrections? Little ones, maybe big ones? You know, often for some periods, one partner needs to take a lead, but it shouldn't be that one person takes the lead for a lifetime. I mean, you can take turns doing that. I mean, I like to think that you can do much of what you want to do, never everything, but you can do much of what you want to do spread out over a lifetime. So you just need to coordinate, make sure the kids are taken care of, and then you can talk about, well, you know, whose preference gets to come first this time on if we're moving again, where we move, or how can it work for both of us? That's the main thing, not to look at it as a zero-sum game, but how can you maximize your decisions that you're both as happy as possible?
So the communication has come up a lot. I've learned a lot from Corey and you, how I can communicate better. And so I met Neil right after business school. And so I thought about organizational leadership. And I said, Neil, like, I want to have like a quarterly debrief and like reflect on our goals and what we hit. And that just wasn't his style. He was like, stop trying to make our relationship a business. And so I do think figuring out how and when to bring up hard things, like pinches, it's hard to create space for that. I think therapy allows a regular space for that. I also want to share something that Corey said here, which is so often you can get to the end of the day and realize the only thing you've spoken about is boobs and dirty diapers. And so I am just curious, how do you protect time and space to reconnect with with my dad, your husband, or friends? How do you get above the daily grind to reconnect as humans, as adults? I'm just curious.
Well, your godparents are a good example. I mean, they had a practice while their kids were young that they reserved a date night at least once every other week. And they had a date night and they got a babysitter and they went out to dinner. And it wasn't that they were hungering to go to a restaurant. It's that they were hungering to make sure that they were really communicating closely because they both had very demanding jobs also. And I think that's an extraordinary practice. I could never do it because your dad taught every evening. You know, he just wasn't available to do that. And I don't know if he would have been willing to make the time. But another thing to do is, for example, you guys are both into exercise. You could go for long hikes together. And when the baby's little, you can take the baby with you and the baby doesn't interfere with your couple time, really. And then when the baby's older, that's different. But you and Neil could go biking together or hiking together or running together or go kayaking together someplace. Although kayaking isn't so good for talking while you're doing it, but walking and talking, that's just a really nurturing environment to get your endorphins going and to really be able to connect with each other and focus on each other. So not on really difficult terrain where you have to be looking down at the rocks to make sure you don't fall off a cliff. But I think that's something that would suit you and Neil. And get suggestions from your YaYas. You know, how is it that they protect their twinness with their spouse, even though there's so many demands on everybody's time? I mean, Neil may be in a special situation because the demands on a resident, a postdoc, a fellow are extraordinary, but it's extraordinary for lots of people. I mean, basically, there's not enough time, energy in each day to do nearly all the things you want. And when you're a doctor, you got to take care of your patients well, or you've got to do your research well. That's essential. But you do need to build in a mechanism. Maybe you could get a babysitter and join him at the hospital if he has to stay late for dinner. I mean, not a romantic restaurant, but, just making that special effort to make sure that you guys connect and get other YaYa suggestions. You got a great YaYa group.
Mom, thanks for being so honest about marriage, which I don't think enough people talk about how a marriage changes after a baby comes and through motherhood. So just thank you for being so vulnerable. There's this great Atlantic article out now about how having a baby during the pandemic was so hard, and not enough people talk about the hard stuff. So I really appreciate you.
Having a baby is always hard. I mean, it changes your body. Your body is different. It has to be different. And then there's the issue of getting back into good physical health after the baby. There's the issue of depression. I was so fortunate. I never suffered postpartum depression. But for the people who do, that's very serious and needs to be addressed seriously, including by the partner. Figuring out how you're going to get back in it, whatever it is, back into your career and your friend groups and so forth. It's a radical change in your life. It's the most radical change in your life. And it's for keeps, because, we want to keep these kids, and they are keepers. All mine are. So nothing transforms your life as much as a baby, because that responsibility is permanent and it is substantial. I used to ask your grandmother, my mother-in-law, when did you stop worrying about your children? And she, in her 80s, would say, I'll tell you if I get there. Haven't gotten there yet. So having children is such a seismic shift. There's no other like it. Even marriage. Marriage is huge. But in our society, only about 50% of the marriages last, and others divorce. And I was reading Mary Catherine Bateson's book on composing a further life, and she talks about husbands come and husbands go, and that's not the way I wanted to look at it, but it is true. And an adult can take care of himself or herself, but children can't. Now, children can still have good lives in divorce situations, as you and I see from your brother Yates. And his boys are being very well looked after, nurtured, and loved, even though that marriage didn't last. But ideally, they last, and you want to work to make it last. And to do that, since we all change over a lifetime, you have to communicate regularly to understand, and each of you needs to be wholly candid and talk and say some things that may be hard. But if you don't say the hard things gently with love, then the other person might not hear you. We don't all listen closely enough to each other. It's not just about talking. It's at least 50% or more about listening and understanding. And I feel I do that much better as I have grown older. I can see more because I'm listening more. I've got a lifetime of empathy built up. So I can read between the lines and the tones about how people are feeling. I can be more sensitive in the way I say things, be less judgmental. I mean, I don't have control over anything anymore. But I want to be a force for good in my children's and my whole family's life. I have my sisters to support me always. Praise the Lord. You know what a wonderful aunt she is. And golly, she's been a wonderful sister all my life. So you stay really close with with the people who mean the most to you. You can't be equally close with everyone, and you can't measure things too closely. Like, well, you went for 2 hours with your colleague, but you only gave me an hour. I mean, it's not a contest, but support each other. Interact with other couples. That's a way you can be friends and still have couple time, as long as you can talk candidly. It's got to be friends who will really open up and not just put on the good face as if everything's rosy with them if it's not. I mean, being honest, a lot of it is just simple honesty. You understand yourself. Neil understands himself. Corey understands herself. We just got to know ourselves and then be honest in sharing who we are now. And who we are now isn't who we'll be in 6 months necessarily, exactly. And I'm certainly not the person I was when I was your age. Life changes you. So you get, I feel like I'm a sedimentary rock. I've got all of these accumulated layers over decades and decades and decades.
Wow. I mean, self-awareness is something I work on, but as you said, I'm an evolving person and being. And so my self-awareness last week might not catch up with my self-awareness when I'm 2 days into motherhood. So it feels like an ongoing reflection and check-in that I need to figure out how to do with myself. And when you're underslept, I'm just not sure what the best check-ins will be, but I know I'll have you for those check-ins. And thank you so much for making time to talk with me, Mom, about the realities of motherhood. We're going to have to continue this conversation. This is the first of a Mom Salon series where I get to interview other moms I admire so I can learn from them as part of the YaYa community. And if you want to be a YaYa for others, as Corey is for me, as my mom is for me, please sign up. We're building a startup at joinyaya.com. And thank you so much, Mom. You mean the world to me.
I love you forever.
Bye.
Bye now.